he in that conversation tell you what he wanted you to do with Mr. Pendley and Mr. Maxwell?
I assumed in that conversation, no. I assumed that we were back to Pendley and Maxwell involved, and certainly Pendley involved in the investigation.
The conversation on the 28th, at any time, did he ever take the position as he wanted you to fire Mr. Pendley and Mr. Maxwell?
Not in the morning meeting.
All right.
That was in later.
Okay, you've referred now to a later. So did you have a second conversation on the 28th with Mr. Maxwell, with Mr. Paxton?
Yes, I did.
And what was the occasion of that conversation?
It was, my best guess is, it was sometime after 9 p.m.
Let's see.
Because I was in my condo. And this was completely contrary to the morning's conversation.
In what way? How was it different?
This was the second time that Attorney General Paxton was very upset, very angry.
Did you form any opinion in your own mind in terms of how he was acting as to what was going on here?
What's up with my thumbnail?
I believed he had been drinking.
All right. Did it sound like that to you?
I mean, again, the best you can tell were the fun. It was so unlike any conversation I'd ever had with him.
How would you characterize the conversation?
I mean, he was angry, he was upset. I felt like perhaps there was someone else with him because he was literally saying the same things that we now had discussed 2 times before, repeating the same things, but in an agitated, I thought maybe he was recording the conversation. I mean, it was a horrible, horrible feeling, especially for someone that...
During that, how long did that conversation last?
I mean, 10, 15 minutes.
And in your situation, what was your response?
I mean, I did not get angry with him. I was really confused. I was troubled because he kept pressing the same things over and over again.
And what were those things over and over again?
It all dealt with the hiring of Mr. Kamek.
And what did it have to do with Mr. Pendley and Mr. Maxwell?
Well, he at one point in that conversation, he wants me to fire them, and he says he's reviewed the policies and procedures, and the first assistant can sign the contract.
Okay.
I want to ask you about that. So did he suggest, what did he suggest, if anything, about whether you could or should sign the contract?
He suggested that I could and I should sign the contract.
And what did you say?
I said I would not sign the contract.
You tell him why?
I said it because I'm a rule of law guy. I believe in those policies and procedures.
And the schedule for that, if the contract had been approved, if Mr. Pendley had approved, where would it go next?
I think it goes up, and we'd have to look at the memo, but I think Ms. Mace has to approve it. I think it then either goes up to either Missy or Ryan. It's a couple before it reaches me, but the memo would be the best.
Would it have to work its way up to Mr. Bangert for sure before it got to you?
I believe so.
All right. At the end of the day,
all left. Good call, though.
Did he do you recall whether he ever said anything to you about whether ask you a question about anything having to do with what if about him signing?
Yeah, he asked now in retrospect, I think I understand why he asked it. But we had this discussion about the policies and the procedures. Again, this would have been at least the 3rd time that we had it. He urges me to sign it. And then at one point near the end of the conversation, he asked me the question, well, what if I've signed it? And
what if he signs it?
Yeah, he asked me, what if I signed it already?
Right. What if I signed it, Ms. Manella? What if I signed it? Thank you. If you would put that on there, it'd be the evening of 9/28 in that conversation. He says to you, what if I had already signed it?
What if I'd already signed it?
Yeah. And you're certain of that?
Yes.
All right. What'd you tell him?
I told him that I would consider the contract void.
Did he say to you he had already signed it?
He did not say that.
Now, why would you consider a contract void if the Attorney General signed it, even if you opposed it?
Because the policies
Oh
and
my God, I put the
procedures were in
thumbnail on the wrong
place
video.
in such a way to protect him and to protect the agency. If he had gone so
My
far
transition is what
outside
crashed the
our
stream.
policies and procedures on behalf of one person, against your whole staff, pursuing a private matter using public resources, I mean, to me, that has to be a
Also-
void contract.
Well, do you think he
Regios
had the
in the
authority
chat.
to sign a contract
Enter in the chat.
hiring Mr. Kamek?
I think the Attorney General has the authority to sign contracts. I will say,
I gotta
however,
fix my mess here.
the policies and procedures of the office, the Attorney General did not sign many contracts.
All right. Had you ever known him to sign one of these types of contracts before?
Not an outside counsel contract.
But more to the point, do you think it was illegal under any circumstances for him to do it, or did you think it was a violation of policy that had been running the department since you were there?
Well, I thought it was wrong in this case, knowing everything I knew. That doesn't mean I don't believe the Attorney General can't sign contracts. But I think in
Objection non-responsive. He asked him whether it was legal for the Attorney General to sign contract. We'd like to have an answer to that question.
He's giving his answer. There's cross-examination for him to explore, in all due respect.
Non-responsive, Your Honor.
To be fair, you do get to cross-examine. You ask him if you want to know so damn bad.
Sustained.
It's not my job.
Well, let me ask you this.
Your Honor, we'd like an answer to the question then. Is it legal for the Attorney General to sign a contract? That was the question.
You know, as much as
Here we go. Here comes the drama.
I've made it this far in life without advice from Mr. Busby, I'm going to try to make it the
There
rest
it
of my
is.
life. I'll ask my questions, and if he objects, that's fine.
I believe you asked the question.
Yes, I'll be glad to. I was in the process of trying to.
I believe you asked it. Let me look at the transcript.
Thank you very much. When do you...
Hold on 1 second. I'm
Sure.
looking at the transcript.
Sure.
Lord have mercy. Here they go. Here they go. What are you doing? Stinky girl. Stinky girl. It's almost
You
about
asked
that
the
time.
question. The witness can answer.
I was wondering why
Is it
she was
illegal
up.
for
I
him
was
to
like, why are
sign a
you up
contract?
so early? Oh,
Now,
time to eat again.
let me ask you this.
Actually, he needs to answer the question.
Counselor, you asked the question. We've confirmed it on the transcript.
Ooh,
Witness will answer
Regios
the
again.
question.
Thank you very much.
Double dip.
Can you restate it? Because if the question is, can the Attorney General sign a contract, is that illegal? And that's what I understand the question to be.
Counselor, restate the question. You've asked it once.
I was
Restate
looking
the
back-
question.
Thank you. Your Honor, I was looking back to see what I asked.
It was line 21.
Thank you.
Newsflash, they write all these questions down.
I think the question I see that I asked through all that exchange was, do you think it was illegal under or was a violation of policy that had been running the department since you were there? But my question, let me try to break it down. Did you have an opinion that it
Your
was...
Honor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Excuse
I'd
me.
like the witness to answer the question.
I've withdrawn the question. I will proceed to the next with permission, of course, of the court.
Yeah, pay attention. Slick back.
You asked the question. The witness hasn't answered.
Here we go. He just said he
We don't
withdrew
know
the
what
question.
the question was anymore. I'm sorry.
Your Honor, he
Apologize.
suggested that it's illegal for the Attorney General of the state of Texas to sign a contract. This witness knows it's not, and he should say so.
And I'll be glad to ask that question my way. I'll withdraw the question before, and if, with the court's permission, proceed.
Yeah, like you know, like in football when they freeze the kicker, that's what they did to him. They froze him, and now they're insisting after we froze him that he has to do it again.
You
Like,
may withdraw the question.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yeah, he can withdraw
Now,
the question.
but I
Like
do
that's
wanna proceed
bullshit.
the
He can't.
topic, and
You
that
can't freeze
is,
me, throw off my
did
fucking
you
train of thought,
believe,
and then make me keep
or
going
what
down that
was your
same train of
belief
thought
as
after you
to
threw me
whether
off the
it
track.
was legally
No, I can reset
unlawful
and do what I want
for
to do.
him to sign a contract and hire Mr. Paxton unilaterally, or did you think it was a violation of your policy? Just explain to us what your thought process was.
And I believe you mean Mr. Kamek.
Pardon me?
You said hiring Mr. Paxton.
Well,
you
I'm
meant
glad,
Mr. Kamek.
I'm glad you're following me. You're right. With that correction, Mr. Paxton, back into the microphone so that both of us, there you go. What's your answer?
So I believed at that time in that conversation
back. I
with
gotta
the
make a
Attorney
bottle.
General on the evening of September 28th that not only did signing that contract, if in fact the Attorney General had signed it, I believed that it violated our policies and procedures. But I also believed in the circumstances of Mr. Kamek knowing everything that we knew, that it was unlawful.
And why did you mean it? Why did you think it was unlawful in light of all the circumstances?
Because Mr. Kamek was being hired to do something that I did not believe was in the interest of the state. And that there wasn't the Attorney General is not above the law. He has to comply with the law like all of us. And so again, knowing the whole circumstances at this point in time, that's what I believed.
What was your opinion, one way or the other, as to whether if that signing of that contract was in pursuit of an unlawful purpose, was it, in your opinion, therefore unlawful?
Correct.
All right. Now, and the purpose in this matter, were you aware of what your staff, needing Mr. Pendley and Mr. Maxwell, believed as to whether what they were being asked to do?
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay. We're going to hear from both Mr. Maxwell and Mr. Pendley.
Was whether what they were being, and you have an opinion, or were you aware one way or the other as to what their position was? That's all I'm asking.
Repeat that question.
Thank you. Were you aware at this time as to what position Mr. Pendley and Mr. Maxwell had taken as to whether what they were being asked to do was unlawful?
Your Honor, can we hear from Mr. Pendley and Mr. Maxwell about their belief of this contract rather than hear him tell us what they told him? This is hearsay.
I'm not asking for communication. Excuse me. I think she was talking. I apologize.
Restate the question.
Thank you. Were you aware at that time, and we are in September of 9/28 of 2020, were you aware at that time, one way or the other, as to whether what Mr. Pendley and Mr. Maxwell's position was as to whether or not what the Attorney General and Mr. Paul were asking them to do was lawful? Just whether you were aware of what their opinion was. I'm not asking you if you were what it was.
Your Honor, I object to that. He suggested Mr. Paul was somehow talking about this contract. There's no evidence of any of that. And therefore, the question is vague and assumes facts that certainly are not in evidence.
You can ask the question, was he aware?
That's all. Was he aware? And not what it was. I haven't asked him what it was.
Any answer?
I was aware.
All right. And did that have anything to do with your opinion as to what you were telling the Attorney General and how resistant you were to what he wanted to do?
Yes, it did.
By the way,
Yes, it did.
Thank you very much. All right. Now, how did that conversation end?
It ended abruptly.
And then I want to try to move pretty quickly here through these last matters. That was Monday the 28th, was it not?
Correct.
On Tuesday the 29th, did you learn any new information that concerned you greatly?
Yeah, I was in a conference call, a Zoom meeting actually, involving all the chief deps across the country, a bipartisan meeting. We were dealing with opioids. And I got an urgent message, first from my assistant and then from Ms. Mace, the deputy for admin, that there was an emergency.
All right. And when you got up, what did you do when you got that
Gotta
call?
sterilize her bottle parts.
That message, excuse me.
I think I was leading the meeting, and I excused myself from the meeting because Miss Mace and Ms. Hornsby wouldn't interrupt me unless it were really something important, because they knew I was on an important call.
What did you learn?
I learned that a bank had called Miss Mace and informed her that Mr.
Objection, hearsay.
All right.
Sustained.
You don't need to tell what you did, but what did you, as a result of the phone call, of the conversation, did you talk to Ms. Mays, or how did you find out?
I talked to Miss Mace.
All right. And what were you concerned about then?
I was concerned that that Mr. Kamek was saying that he was working for the Office of Attorney General and was engaged in activities.
What's up, Alex?
What
Marcus
kind of
only in the chat.
activities?
He was serving subpoenas.
What type of subpoenas?
His activities.
And were they the grand jury subpoenas?
But they were grand jury subpoenas.
Did you have any idea how or why he was obtaining grand jury subpoenas?
Not on September 29th.
All right. And at that time,
knows.
what did you do as a result of getting
What
that
is this
information?
document they're saying was illegal for Paxton to sign?
Debriefed
It
with
was
Ms.
a
Mays.
contract to hire
I
somebody
believe at a certain
without
point,
the permission of
Mr.
everybody
Banger,
else.
perhaps Mr. Brickman, and some of the other deputies were actually over here at the Capitol meeting with either the governor's office or lieutenant governor's office. I don't remember.
So he
And
kind of like,
and what did you do as far as that?
what it sounds like
called
is
them
Paxton
back.
kind of like
All
brought
right.
the guy in
So
to
when
just
you
like
called
talk
them
to him
back,
in the
where
office,
did you call them back
and then
to?
Back
from
to the
everyone
8th floor.
else's perspective,
was there a
they thought
meeting?
it was an
There was a
interview.
meeting.
And as best
So
you
he just
remember,
said
who
that
all
was the
did
interview.
you have in that
Remember,
meeting?
he came in and talked to you.
I
Remember?
know it was
And
Mr. Banger. Ms.
Dude's
And
a
it
Mays,
fucking
was
Boy Scout. He's
September
like,
the
that is
29th?
not what happened, sir.
September the 29th.
Okay.
It was Mr.
not
Banger.
interview him.
Ms.
I did
Mays,
not sign that.
Mr. Penley, Mr. Maxwell was out of town. Ms. Carey was out of town. Mr. Vassar, Mr. Brickman. I may be missing someone, but that's the best of my recollection.
And what was the purpose of this meeting?
We were trying to figure out what was going on.
What was your concern?
My concern was we had somebody out there that wasn't part of our organization representing that he was an official with the Attorney General's office.
Now, did you have any idea at that time whether or not there was a signed contract between Mr. Paxton and Mr. Campen?
I had no idea.
All right. Had you ever seen such a contract?
Not at that time.
Had everybody ever suggested to you there was such a signed contract?
Not at that time.
All right. Now, what can you describe sort of the atmosphere of this group? I mean, what's happening? I want you to try to describe it for me without going into what each person was saying.
Yeah, I mean, we considered it sort of a crisis moment. I mean, everything regarding Mr. Paul was kind of coming to a head. And so at some point, Mr. McCarty joined. I don't think I'd mentioned Mr. McCarty. And he wasn't in the original meeting, but eventually he joins. And so it's really the first time that each of the deputies started to share, and without getting into what they shared, but started to share information concern each bits and pieces about Mr. Paul and his activities with the Attorney General.
What is your testimony, Mr. Mateer, as to whether or not, in many ways, people shared different things that you had never heard before?
I mean, I learned things in that meeting that I hadn't known before.
In terms of relationships with the Attorney General and Mr. Paul?
Correct.
All right. You have any explanation as to how you, the first assistant, would not know what all had been going on over the last 9 months or so?
I mean, quite frankly, I beat myself up a little bit. I felt like I probably should have known more, but, in my defense, we had a lot going on, and the way, we believed, and I believe General Paxton believed, we believed in letting our leaders lead. And so they were each handling and managing their various divisions.
What we do around here, baby.
And so I would only know what I'm told.
Shake those babas.
And this was really the first time with everybody in a room together, folks began to share.
Well, how would you describe in terms of their alarm, one way or the other?
Well, we were very serious.
I want to go back to a subject, and you know that the allegations here, and all this has been public, about an affair that Mr. Paxton had with another person.
Yes, yes.
When did you first, before I go into questions about it, I want you to explain or express in your own way why that is relevant to the bigger picture of Mr. Paxton and Mr. Paul, in your mind, if it is.
No, unfortunately, it is relevant.
Stay with the microphone, please.
I'm sorry. Unfortunately, it is
she's good.
relevant. During that week, the last week in the office, and I have to wind back.
It's not so bad.
I have to wind back a little bit if I can, Mr. Harden. I first I and other senior leadership in the Office of Attorney General became aware that Mr. Paxton was involved in an extramarital relationship sometime in 2016.
And when?
2016.
All right.
Prior to 2016, that's incorrect. It was, no, that is.
And then
I got to get it was before I've got to think back to his reelection. It's his first reelection.
my question is, did you become aware of it for the first time in 2018?
2018, that's when he was reelected. He was elected in 2014 the first time, 2018 the second time. So it would have been in the August, September time period of 2018, before his fall election.
How did you become aware?
I think the first person I heard was someone in D.C. had actually mentioned it.
Objection hearsay, Your Honor. And I'm also, this was a prime example of counsel suggesting the date to this witness. The witness, and this demonstrates the witness can't remember.
Pardon me, the way this should work is simply state an objection. It is
Objection
not
to
the
this
occasion
is
for
hearsay.
Thank you.
Sustained.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. So let's go back.
Yeah, he is wasting time
Were you
explaining all of
present
his
at an occasion
objections for 30
when
seconds.
Mr. Paxton confessed the affair to members of the staff?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Paxton, Mrs. Paxton, Senator Paxton, gathered senior staff from the Office of Attorney General and senior staff from the campaign. We had a meeting at the campaign office in which Mr. Paxton revealed that he had been engaged in an extramarital affair and asked for our forgiveness.
And was it a very emotional, sympathetic meeting?
It was a very emotional meeting, yes.
And that was with both Mr.
How
and
weird.
Senator Paxton.
Why would it be my
They were both in
employee's
attendance.
business?
And at that, would it have been a general moment of sympathy for the whole event?
Absolutely.
Like, I wouldn't care what they're doing.
After that, were there any assurances and so made by Mr. Paxton at that time?
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Paxton
The
apologized.
bin boys and girls can do whatever the fuck they want without judgment from me.
Christian
Fucking, are you kidding
terminology,
me?
I would say he repented, and I know that's a Christian term, but from my perspective, that's what I believed.
And was that really the tone and the way the whole encounter
It absolutely was, and then we moved on, and obviously with the expectation that he had made a mistake, he had apologized, and we were moving on from it.
When that meeting was over, what was your assumption
Yes,
going
she
forward
does.
as to whether that event was over, I mean, the affair?
She does hold her own bottles.
I assumed it
Shaking
was
the bottle
over
give
'cause
babies.
that's what he said.
Doesn't shaking the bottle give the
When
baby
did
gas,
you
or
first
is there
become
some
aware that
newfangled
it was
anti-gas
not over?
method?
And how? Without what somebody told you, was there any other
I mean, if you
personal-
get some
I'm only asking
extra
you for
air
a
in there,
time,
I just kind of do like a pss, pss, pss.
dates or
that
years
stuff out,
that you
but
became aware that it was
Most
not
of the air she gets in her
wasn't
stomach
until-
is
Your
from
Honor,
her.
this is,
You know what I
unless
mean?
Mr. Paxton told
They
him
don't know how
something
to
after
eat.
that meeting, this is all based
Right.
on rumor or hearsay.
Sustained. Continue.
In your own mind, did you ultimately believe that it had resumed.
Again, that would be based on hearsay, and it's not relevant what he believed about Mr.
Just
Paxton's
state your objection. What is your objection?
hearsay, and relevance.
Sustain.
All right. Why
Yeah,
did
keep it
you
brief,
think, if you believed the affair had resumed, that was relevant to your concern about the lieutenant, about the Attorney General and Mr. Paul?
Because it answered one of the questions that I kept struggling with is, why would General Paxton jeopardize all this great work that we had been doing at in the Office of Attorney General? Why would he be engaged in these activities on behalf of one person? I mean, all these different things. And by this time, we knew he had hired Mr. Kamek. Why would he do this against his
The hiring of
advice
Mr. Kamek,
of
Andrew,
his,
that's what they were talking about before. That's the document
people who he
signed.
trusted to run his office, including me? And it answered that why question.
Had you become aware by that time that the woman he was having the affair with had been hired by Mr. Paul?
I learned it that week.
I'm sorry. Objection hearsay, Your Honor.
That's not hearsay.
Overruled. Continue.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I
Fuck that.
learned that this person had been hired by Mr. Paul that week,
And why was that relevant to you?
because it answered the question, why is he engaging in all these activities? And it was like,
Made on behalf of Mr. Paul?
on behalf of Mr. Paul, why is he engaged in this? I mean, it seemed to me he was under undue influence. At times I thought, is he being blackmailed? I mean, this was so unlike what I experienced with him for 4 years. And this was part of it. There may have been more, there may have been others, but this was certainly part of it.
Mr. Mateer, did you ultimately resign?
I did.
When did you resign?
I resigned on that Friday, October 2nd.
And I believe we have asked before, let me make sure I'm right, you did not sue and you do not have any suit pending against either the Attorney General's office or Mr. Paxton or anyone out of this. Is that correct?
I do not.
If you go back to the things, what is your testimony as to whether you
Oh,
learned
well
a lot
done,
more that
Thanksgiving
gave you
turkey.
concern, without going into what it was, on the 29th, as all,
I like having
all
my
of these
chat on my
deputies
phone.
began to compare
I
notes?
can't see that screen all the way over there. This is way better.
What is your testimony as to the very
I'm used to doing
reluctant
this anyway.
conclusion you came to?
I mean, by that time, the 29th, because the next day is when we go to the FBI and DOJ. By that time, I concluded that Mr. Paxton was engaged in conduct that was immoral, unethical, and I had a good faith belief that it was illegal.
What was your thought process as to what you would believe would happen if you did this? What did you believe might happen to you and the others if you did come forward?
I mean, I knew by that time that my tenure as first assistant was coming to a quick end. So I knew that there would be, anytime someone stands up, that there could be consequences. So I knew I was in the process of leaving the office.
You, of course, were not here and did not hear the opening statements in this case, did you?
I did not.
Let me ask you this. How long, by the September the 29th and 30th, had you become aware
Got a rib out of place.
that different members of the top level administrators in this department had in different ways been trying to stop the Attorney General from helping Mr. Paul?
Objection leading.
Sustain.
Damn.
Did you have a thought process in your own mind as to why you needed to go finally to law enforcement?
How am I
Felt
able
like
to read closed
we had been
captioning
trying
of
to
what they're
protect
saying before they say it
Mr.
live?
Paxton.
Hey, don't think.
On
Hey, don't
several
worry about it.
occasions,
Don't
I'd
ask too many
gone to him,
questions.
and
Are you asking
really my-
questions? Are you asking questions? Do we have to
He had
investigate
become-
you?
He was my
Did
boss.
you find out
He
something
had
you're
become a
supposed to know?
friend. I cared for him. I cared
I
for
got a
Senator
burper.
Paxton. And I wanted him I wanted him, I think in one of the memos I say, come clean. I wanted
You
to
wanted
help.
what?
Come clean.
Microphone.
Come clean.
Yeah.
I wanted to, my job, I feel one of the jobs of the first assistant is to protect, in addition to running the office, was to protect the Attorney General. And quite frankly, I obviously failed at that. But I came to the conclusion that Mr. Paul had enabled Mr. Paxton, and despite my efforts, the other deputies' efforts, we couldn't protect him because he didn't want to be protected.
As you ultimately made your decisions, and as you have learned and things have happened soon, did you change your mind as to whether or not General Paxton was simply being blackmailed or something else? Did you ultimately make a conclusion of what you believed reluctantly about the conduct of the Attorney General?
Yeah, again, in the end, I reached the conclusion that Mr. Paul enabled him to engage in the conduct that Mr. Paxton engaged in.
What is your opinion as to whether or not the level of responsibility the Attorney General had?
Ultimately, the Attorney General was responsible for his conduct.
I'll pass the witness.
We'll take a 10-minute break here. All right.
Let's see something cute. Good job, baby. Hi. Cutest little thing ever. And you drink all your milk because you're such a good girl. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. This one? Okay. Oh, shit. Damn it. All right. Start the trial over again. I'm back. Let's go to what they ended on.
Out of this, is that correct?
I do not.
If there are any assurances and so made by
I've got to think back to his reelection.
Your Honor, and I'm also, this was a prime example of counsel suggesting the date to this witness. The witness, and this demonstrates the witness can't remember.
Pardon me, the way this should work is simply state an objection. It is
Objection
not
to
the
this
occasion
is
for
hearsay.
Thank you.
Sustained.
Thank you very much. When Mr.
Paxton, seniors from the camp, Mr. Paxton revealed
or so made by Mr. Paxton at the
And I know
and was that really the tone and the way the whole encounter went?
it absolutely was. The expectation that he had made a mistake, he had apologized, and we were moving on from it.
When that meeting was over, what was your assumption going forward as to whether that event was over, the affair?
I mean, I assumed it was over because that's what he said.
When did you first become aware that it was not over, and how? Without what somebody told you, was there any other personal, I'm only asking you for a time, dates or years that you became aware that it was not over?
It wasn't until...
Your Honor, this is, unless Mr. Paxton told him something after that meeting, this is all based on rumor or hearsay.
Sustained. Continue.
In your own mind, did you ultimately believe that it had resumed?
Again, that would be based on hearsay, and it's not relevant what he believed about Mr.
Just
Paxton's
state your objection. What is your objection?
hearsay, and relevance.
Sustained.
All right. Why did you think, if you believed the affair had resumed, that was
them
relevant
cheeks.
to your concern about the lieutenant,
She's 80%
about the
cheeks.
attorney general and Mr. Paul?
And all the rest is smiles
Because it answered one of the questions
and hair.
that I kept struggling with is,
PewDiePie.
why would General Paxton jeopardize all this great
Zero.
work that we had been doing at in the Office of Attorney
Shut
General?
up.
Why would he be engaged in these activities on behalf of one person? I mean, all these different things. And by this time, we knew he had hired Mr. Kamek. Why would he do this against his advice of his
Something's in my eye.
the people who he trusted to run his office, including me? And it answered that why question.
Oh, there's a cat
Had
hair
you
in my
become
glasses.
aware by that time
I'm telling you, I thought there was like a
that
bug trying to
the
get in my
woman he was
eye.
having the affair with had been hired by Mr.
Damn cat hair.
Paul?
I learned it that week.
I'm sorry. Objection hearsay, Your Honor.
Damn you, Dexter.
Overruled. Continue.
Thank you.
I learned that this person had been hired by Mr. Paul that week,
And why was that relevant to you?
because it answered the question, why is he engaging in all these activities? And it was like,
Made on behalf of Mr. Paul?
on behalf of Mr. Paul, why is he engaged in this? I mean, it seemed to me he was under undue influence. At times I thought, is he being blackmailed? I mean, this was so unlike what I experienced with him for 4 years. And this was part of it. There may have been more, there may have been others, but this was certainly part of it.
Mr.
It's that
Mateer,
MAGA got into him, boy.
did you ultimately resign?
I did.
When did you resign?
I resigned on that Friday, October 2nd.
And I believe we have asked before, let me make sure I'm right. You did not sue, and you do not have any suit pending against either the Attorney General's office or Mr. Paxton or anyone out of this. Is that correct?
I do not.
If you go back to the things, what is your testimony as to whether you learned a lot more that gave you concern, without going into what it was, on the 29th, as all of these deputies began to compare notes?
Zero. Will you knock it off, dude?
What is your testimony as to the very reluctant conclusion you came to?
I mean, by that time, the 29th, because the next day is when we go to the FBI and DOJ. By that time, I concluded that Mr. Paxton was engaged in conduct that was immoral, unethical, and I had a good faith belief that it was illegal.
What was your thought process as to what you would believe would happen if you did this? What did you believe might happen to you and the others if you did come forward?
I mean, I knew by that time that my tenure as first assistant was coming to a quick end. So I knew that there would be, anytime someone stands up, that there could be consequences. So I knew I was in the process of leaving the office.
You, of course, were not here and did not hear the opening statements in this case, did you?
I did not.
let me ask you this. How long, by the September the 29th and 30th, by then had you become aware that different members of the top level administrators in this department had in different ways been trying to stop the Attorney General from helping Mr. Paul?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
Ask
Did
one
you have a
question at a
thought
time. Why does
process
he
in
keep
your
doing
own
this?
mind as to why you needed to go finally to law enforcement?
I felt like we had been trying to protect Mr. Paxton. On several occasions, I'd gone to him, and really he had become, he was my boss. He had become a friend. I cared for him. I cared for Senator Paxton. And I wanted him, I think in one of the memos I say, come clean. I wanted
You
to
wanted
help.
what?
Come clean.
Microphone.
Come clean.
Yeah.
I wanted to, my job, I feel one of the jobs of the first assistant is to protect, in addition to running the office, was to protect the Attorney General. And quite frankly, I obviously failed at that.
Well, he's got a real fucking
But I came to the conclusion
savior
that
complex.
Mr. Paul had enabled Mr. Paxton, and despite my efforts, the other deputies' efforts, we couldn't protect him because he didn't want to be protected.
As you ultimately made your decisions, and as you have learned and things have happened soon, did you change your mind as to whether or not General Paxton was simply being blackmailed or something else? Did you ultimately make a conclusion of what you believed reluctantly about the conduct of the Attorney General?
Yeah, again, in the end, I reached the conclusion that Mr. Paul enabled him to engage in the conduct that Mr. Paxton engaged in.
What is your opinion as to whether or not the level of responsibility the Attorney General had?
Ultimately, the Attorney General was responsible for his conduct.
I'll pass
the witness, please. Thank you.
We'll take a 10-minute break here.
All right, let's see if we're caught up. Oh, yeah. I'll move my game over in a second. Playing a little Exo Primal. Some good stuff, man. And it teaches paleontology, so it's like a, educational thing.
Warning, you will now commence the final mission. Brace yourselves for interdimensional travel. Prepare for combat.
He died.
The final mission is uplink control. Approach the uplink and secure it, then initiate data transfer. Maintain your proximity to an
Hi, everyone.
enemy-controlled uplink.
I'm gonna go kill the other team, then I'll join you.
All dinosaurs will be removed.
That feels good.
Summoning dinosaurs to all uplinks in 30 seconds.
Ready on road.
A Dominator has been generated for your team. Use the Dominator to commandeer a dinosaur and attack the enemies. Dinosaur is summoned to all.
Wow, they all died.
Dominator activated. Take advantage of this unique asset and defeat the enemy.
Here comes the
Uplink A
rocket.
shut down.
Let's talk about this.
Uplink B shut
Oh my
down.
god, if I killed one of them with just my normal suit, imagine. Oh, come on, let me get the last shot.
Uplink C shut down. All dinosaurs will be removed.
This thing is all over the place. I got one. Cherry pick that shit.
Uplink C secured. Uplink A has been lost.
Alright. I don't want to die.
Summoning dinosaurs to all uplinks in 30 seconds. Murasame Alpha's ice cold counters lock down enemies so allies can bring the pain.
Anyway.
Uplink B secured. Dinosaurs will be summoned shortly. Dinosaurs summoned
Anyway.
to all uplinks. Uplink B is taking damage. Defend it.
We have to wait for all the
Data
droids that are here
transfer
from
25% complete. Uplink C is taking damage. Defend it. I have awarded the enemy team a domino. They may invade with a
No!
Uplink B shut down. Uplink A shut
Members, would
down.
all the drawers in the back please come
Uplink
forward
C
immediately?
shut
That
down.
was perfect. That's a clip. That's gonna be a short. God damn it. I think they're back.
All dinosaurs will be removed. Warning.
Oops, I'm over
The
here
enemy
pushing
team
shit.
has activated a dominator.
Oh yeah. Is that what you think, little girl? I just be calling people back. Don't nobody listen. Don't nobody come back. Like,
Missing one juror.
oh, who in the bathroom? Come on, man. You said 10 minutes.
Senator Miles and Senator Colcourse with their staff. Senator Miles, thank you. Senator Colcourse.
Come on. Get going. You can tell politicians don't do shit for a living. Look how long they take to do everything. You'd be fired taking this long on a break. You could never take, you know, you wouldn't make it past the probationary period taking this long.
Okay, members of the jury, just a reminder, if we take a 10-minute break, be here 10 minutes, even if I'm not here. I need the jury to be here because I don't like walking out and not having the jury here, so just moving forward best we can.
Thank you. Some of us have streams.
Mr. Busby.
Mr. Mateer, you told us Ken Paxton was your friend,
He became my friend, yes.
and you were trying to protect him,
That's correct, sir.
and you were
Here
trying
we
to
go.
protect him from himself.
Correct.
And when you found out that this young man, Brandon Kamek, had sent a subpoena to a bank, you guys sent everybody on the 8th floor home and had a meeting, right?
I don't recall us sending everybody home. I do recall we had a meeting.
And in order to protect Ken Paxton, what you did was then call the FBI, right? That's how you protected your friend.
That's not correct, sir.
Did you not go to the FBI thereafter?
Not that day, sir.
What day?
The next day, sir.
Okay. Did you talk to Ken Paxton before you went to the FBI?
General Paxton was out of state.
Did you talk to Ken Paxton before you went to the FBI?
I talked to him on the 28th, yes.
After, sir, listen, you found out that Brandon Kamek had served a subpoena on a bank, right? Right?
That is correct, yes.
You thought it was a crisis situation, right?
That is correct, sir.
You rallied the troops together and had a meeting, right?
We had a meeting, yes, sir.
The next day you went to the FBI.
We did, yes, sir.
Did you, after your meeting, talk to Ken Paxton?
I did not talk to Ken Paxton.
Okay, so in order to help your friend, a guy that had given you a really plum of a job, instead of asking him some questions, you instead circled up and decided to go to the FBI. That's what happened, right?
I did have conversations with General Paxton.
Not after that meeting, right?
Not after the meeting on the 29th, correct, sir.
You had no clue that Brandon Kamek had received a second referral from the DA's office, did you?
I did not.
You were wondering why they were serving subpoenas on a bank when the complaint that you knew about had to do with the FBI and the magistrate judge, right?
That's correct.
You had no clue that there had been a second referral from the DA's office directly to Brandon Kamek. Isn't that right?
That's right. No one had shared that with us.
So you thought this Kamek fellow is sending subpoenas to banks related to some FBI thing, right?
I didn't know what he was doing.
You know how you could have found out? You know how you could have found out?
Objection,
You could have picked
speculation.
up the phone and
What are you
called your
doing,
boss
lawyer?
and say, hey, boss, what's up with this Brandon Kamek? He sent a subpoena to a bank. And he could have told you, well, I have the authority to sign a contract because I am the elected AG, and he's sending subpoenas based on a second referral. You could have done that, right?
I could have done that.
But instead what you did was rally your troops, get your stories together, and go to the FBI. Isn't that right?
That's not how I'd characterize it.
Did you also talk to Dick Trabolsi?
Dick
Not at that time,
Trabolsi?
no.
Who the
How
hell is
soon
that?
after that did you talk to Dick Trabolsi?
I think
You know who I'm talking about, don't you?
it's the leader.
Tell us who he is.
I believe he's the leader of Texans for Lawsuit Reform.
He sent you a text, didn't he?
He sent me a text after I resigned.
A text of support.
I got many texts of support. He was one of them, yes.
Where are your texts, by the way?
I don't keep texts.
What do you mean by that? You don't keep texts. You deleted your texts?
After I left the Attorney General's office, when I'm no longer employed at the Attorney General's office, I didn't keep texts.
You didn't think anybody might want to look at your texts?
I adhere to zero inbox policy. And I think anybody who's ever worked for me knows that.
Is that right?
That's right.
So just so we're all clear, and everybody's watching is clear, you were having conversations with the leader of Texans for Lawsuit Reform who was showing support for you after you'd went to the FBI and resigned, right?
I had one text message that I received from Mr. Trabolsi after I resigned.
How did he have your phone number? I thought you weren't the kind of person that would talking to people like that. How did he have your phone number?
A lot of people have my phone number. Probably General Paxton gave it to him at one time.
You know we do have some of your texts, don't you?
I mean, I assume you do if others produce them. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we don't have any from you because you say that you delete them. Tell me how you delete them, by the way, because that seems like a challenge. How do you delete every text that's sent to you?
I look at email, I look at texts every day, okay, within a 24-hour time period. If it requires an action, I then note it as a to-do item. If it's unrelated to anything, then I delete. That's been my policy for a year, sir.
Wow, you worked for the government, right?
Well, this was after I worked for the government.
Right, after you were no longer working for the government, you deleted your texts. Is that what you're telling me? Or you delete them real time?
I delete them basically real time within a period of time.
Did anybody else in the office do that, or was that just your practice?
Well, the other person that probably did that was the Attorney General.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so.
Did he have a burner phone, by the way?
You know, someone mentioned that to me at one time.
Who mentioned that? You read about that in the newspaper?
No, I don't think I read about it in the newspaper. It would have either been Mr. Wicker or Mr. Rylander.
Mr. Ricker didn't mention it to you because he was questioned. He said he didn't know what a burner phone was. Who told you that he had a burner phone?
Again, my best recollection would have been Mr. Wicker or Mr. Rylander.
Did you ever see a burner phone?
I know the Attorney General had several phones. I don't know, what a burner phone.
You know what a burner phone is. This would be a burner phone. You can go to 7-Eleven, you can buy it, you use it for a certain amount of minutes, and you throw it in the trash. That's called a burner phone.
Okay.
You ever see Ken Paxton with a burner phone?
He had a flip phone.
Did you ever see a burner phone, one that he bought at 7-Eleven so he could do some sort of illicit business?
I don't know, sir.
Okay. How about a
Complex
secret email
question.
address? You ever see him with a secret email address?
He had a Proton email address.
Didn't you have a Proton email address?
I sure did, yes.
Oh, goodness gracious. So he had the same kind of email address that you had.
Okay.
We've been told that's a secret email address, but you had the same kind of email address, didn't you?
I think a lot of people had them.
Sure.
I think your co-counsel has one.
They do have it. You know why people use a Proton email address?
Because I know why we did, because we were concerned that Google might be monitoring our conversations. We were investigating Google.
Right. And also Ken Paxton and several others went to China, and they wanted to make sure that their email did not get hacked, right?
Okay, correct.
But yet, this board of managers, the House of Managers, claims that that's some kind of secret, weird thing to do, and everybody in the office was doing it. Isn't that right?
Well, I don't think everybody in the office was doing it, but there were some, yes.
Sure. Now, back to your text. Just so the court is clear and the jurors are clear, your testimony is when you receive a text, if it needs action, you note it, and otherwise you delete it.
That's correct.
And you still do that now?
I do.
Well, the good news is Mr. Brickman didn't have that same practice. Let's look at what is marked and in evidence AG 170. And Eric, if you don't mind, go to the page is Brickman 187. Let's put it on the screen so the jurors can see it. What we're going to look at, sir, is a text string that you were on with Brickman and several others, okay?
Okay.
I need you to speak into the mic, please.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Eric, let me know when you're ready. Go to 187, Eric. We're looking at it, AG Exhibit 170. All right, here's a text you sent at 3:02 p.m. on 9/29/2020. Is that right?
That appears to be correct, sir.
And you said, we have a major problem. The kid has served a subpoena on a bank, showed up there in person at the bank, right?
That's what it says, sir.
And you were thinking in your mind, why the devil was he serving a subpoena on the bank? Nate Paul's complaint has to do with the FBI, right?
That was one of the things I was thinking, sir.
Because you had no clue that there had been a second referral, true?
I did not know there was a second referral at this time.
Is this the first time that you had found out that the kid, you're referring to Brandon Kamick, right?
I am referring to Mr. Kamick there.
And you didn't say, hey, Brandon Kamick, you said the kid. Everybody knew who you were talking about, right?
That's right.
Okay. So Kamick wasn't a surprise, was he?
Kamick wasn't a surprise in the sense that we knew who he was. That's correct.
And you actually got a copy of his contract too, didn't you?
At some point, I got a copy of the contract, but not through the DocuSign, no, sir.
Right. I mean, I know and we're going to talk about your bureaucratic procedures. What did you call it? Your executive action memo? What do you call it?
Executive approval memo.
Yeah,
memorandum.
executive approval memo.
Yes, sir.
Some procedure in writing put in place of how things should work at the AG's office.
That's what it was, yes.
Right. It's in some policy manual.
It's a policy, yes.
Okay. It ain't the law, though, is it?
No, it's not the law.
No. The power of the Attorney General derives from the Texas Constitution. Is that not true?
From Texas Constitution and Texas law statutes.
The Constitution is what gives the Attorney General the power to act. Isn't that right?
The Constitution and the statutes passed by the legislature, yes.
Your power to act, if any, derives directly from the AG. Isn't that right?
It's derived from the AG, but it's also derived from the statutes.
Yeah. You're not authorized to take his name off his letterhead, are you?
Am I authorized to take his name off the letterhead?
I'm sorry? Is that a question? Or are you saying?
I'm repeating your question to make sure I understand it. Could you restate it?
I can absolutely restate it. You, as deputy, as first assistant, are not authorized to remove your boss's name from his letterhead, are you?
I don't know if that's true or not.
Did you not look? I mean, aren't you a lawyer? Isn't that something you better look at before you do it?
See, I would
I don't recall
brought up
doing
the Constitution. Is it
You
in the
don't
Constitution
recall
that they
sending
can't change it?
correspondence with the Attorney General's name removed?
I do not.
You wouldn't have done that, would you?
By implication of your question, it must have happened, but I don't remember.
Oh, it happened. My question is that legal?
I don't know it's illegal.
Well, did you check before you guys were sending correspondence without your boss's name on it?
I didn't personally check, no.
Well, I thought you were a rule of law guy. Isn't that what you told us? I'm a rule of law guy.
Here we go.
Okay, rule of law guy, is it legal to send out correspondence without your boss's name on it? Official correspondence from the AG's office?
I don't think it's illegal, no.
You don't think it's illegal?
I do not.
Is that how you decide your legal analysis is by just whether you think it is or not?
No, it's supposed to be based upon what I
Objection,
believed and what I know about the
badgering the
law.
witness.
Well, what do you base that on? Why don't you inform
What I
us?
believe is, what I do recall is before I became first assistant, the prior first assistant, actually one of the complaints that the Attorney General had with the prior first assistant was that the original letterhead didn't have Mr. Paxton's name on it.
So you knew that the official letterhead, according to General Paxton, had his name on it. That's what he insisted upon, right?
Well, he insisted on it, and I don't know about the word official.
And yet, you were party to correspondence where his name was removed.
That I don't know, sir, but if you're saying that, then I must have been.
So let's make sure we're all clear that you did get the contract, because it's in the text even. Eric, turn to same exhibit, AG 170. Go to Brickman 180. Vassar
Okay, she's
texted
just
you a
blowing
copy
bubbles
of
for some reason.
the executed contract, didn't he?
It looks like on October 1st.
Yep. Did you go back then? Was that the same day you met with the FBI?
No.
What day did you meet with the FBI?
I believe we met with the FBI on the 30th, sir.
Okay. So did you go back to the FBI and say, hey, you know what? I made a mistake. There actually is a contract. My boss signed it, and there's a second referral. Did you do that?
Not on October 1st.
You went to the FBI uninformed. Isn't that true?
No, I wouldn't say that, sir.
I just want the timeline because the jurors may wonder. You spoke to the FBI about, what do you call it, a good faith belief that a crime had occurred? Is that what you said? Did you go to the FBI with a good faith belief that a crime had occurred? Is that what you told us?
That's correct.
Okay. And that was on October the 1st?
No, sir.
What day?
That was on the 30th.
September the 30th?
Yes.
Okay. That's when you called Mr. Sutton before that, right?
I didn't, no.
What?
I had not, no.
One of you did?
I believe that's true, yes.
Okay. One of the group called Mr. Sutton before that, right?
I believe that's true.
Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. But so on September 30th, you went to the FBI and you made your good faith complaint, right?
We told the FBI the knowledge that we had.
Did you then go back and give them a copy of the actual signed contract from the duly elected Attorney General?
I did not.
You did not?
I did not.
Did you go back and tell them, hey, you know what, there was actually a second referral. It didn't even come into our office. It, in fact, went directly from the DA's office of Travis County directly to Brandon Cammick? Did you tell them that?
Not on October 1st.
Did you tell them at some point?
I think at some point we did tell them that,
Okay.
yes.
Did they indict Ken Paxton?
As far as I know, they have not.
Okay, so let's try to get our timeline right. That was September of 2020, and this is September of 2023. It's been 3 years.
Your math is correct.
So in 3 years, they've done nothing with the information that you provided them. That's the subject of this impeachment, right?
I don't know what they've done, sir. You
Well-
just ask them.
Well, they certainly are pretty good about letting us know if somebody's been indicted, aren't they?
That's your area. I would assume we would, well, actually, I don't know.
Okay. Your Honor, I know you were concerned about timing. This might be a good break for me. If you want to do it, it's up to you, though, of course. It's noon. I'm getting ready to go into another topic, and it's going to take some time.
We have a good half hour, 45 minutes.
Okay, I'm all for it.
Keep
Okay.
going.
You know, before I get into some of these other areas, like the MIDI Foundation, which you approved of the intervention, right?
I did approve, yes, sir.
The MIDI Foundation, where you approved to investigate them, right?
I did sign that memo, yes.
I mean, let's just make sure we're all clear here. One of the articles of impeachment, in fact, the very first article of impeachment, has to do with the AG's office intervening in the MIDI Foundation lawsuit, right?
You know, if you say so, I'll accept that.
I know you're a rule of law guy. Let's look at Article 1, make sure we're all clear. Article 1 of the impeachment, first article. Just confirm with me, if you would, Mr. Mateer, that is, in fact, the very first article of impeachment that we're here arguing about.
Correct, sir.
And just so we're all clear for our jurors, you, Jeffrey Mateer, approved, along with multiple other people in the office, of that particular intervention. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We're going to come back to that. I believe you have said that you resigned.
She's in
and it was
twilight
on
right
October
now.
2nd,
She's about to fall asleep.
2020, right?
That's correct, sir.
Or drunk.
You resigned because there was no longer a trust between yourself and General Paxton.
That is true, sir.
And we know
Just
that
do
on
it!
September 30th,
Make your dreams come
after
true!
talking to, or at least some of
Thanks
you
for the
talking to a
follow. That
lawyer,
scared me.
you went to the FBI to make a good faith
Welcome.
report that you thought a crime had been committed.
Yes, we went to the FBI on September 30th. That is correct, sir.
Where else did you go? Who else did you talk to?
Later that day, we had a meeting with the office of the governor.
Wait a minute.
Wait a minute.
So we're all clear about this. You had a meeting with the office of the governor? Is that what you just told us?
Yeah, we met with the office of the governor sometimes weekly, sometimes every other week. That was normal course. The governor was our largest client.
Right. I'm just trying to figure this out. You didn't talk to, after your meeting, you didn't talk to Ken Paxton. You instead spoke to, 1, the FBI, 2, the Office of the Governor. Who else did you speak to?
Yo, no.
I'm not recalling anyone else.
Well, we know you got a text of support from TLR, right?
That was after I resigned, sir.
Did you talk to George P. Bush?
I've never talked to George P. Bush.
Never.
Never.
Can you tell us why he just recently, or I guess sometime in May, applied to renew his law license?
I have no idea. I've never talked to George P. Bush.
Object
Okay,
to
we'll come back to
something.
that,
Where
too.
is the other guy taking a nap?
Do you recall that at some point after you resigned that they did an inventory of your office?
Yes.
Now, you're a guy that keeps journals, aren't you?
I keep
Oh
notes.
no, we
yes.
got another
Okay, where
Kavanaugh.
are your notes in the time frame that you're here to testify about?
At some point, I began using a program called OneNote. The office had provided me with an iPad with the pencil, Apple Pencil. And I started, for
Apple
my
Pencil?
one-on-one meetings, I started a practice that actually I do even through today, although I now use a different program. But I used a program called OneNote. I mean, whenever my written notes end, that's when I started using OneNote. And those were on my iPad that I turned in when I resigned. And I think it's a Microsoft Word. I'm not a tech guy either. I think it's a Microsoft Microsoft product that was part of the Word suite. And so when I turned in, and it did link to my computer and my iPad, sir.
You don't know what he's
I don't
talking
really
about.
understand anything you just said. I'm trying to figure
I
out where your
told you.
notes are.
Well,
You don't know.
you're not representing the Office of Attorney General. The Office of Attorney General would have those notes.
No, you
They're on
wiped it.
OneNote.
Sir, sorry to interrupt you.
I'm sorry.
You wiped it clean.
I wouldn't know how to wipe something clean, sir.
Well, you know how to delete text, that's for sure, right?
That's just hitting delete and have an automatic delete on your device.
Eric, let's look at AG Exhibit 127 and go to Exhibit 36 within that exhibit. Hope that's not too confusing. This document is in evidence, and we're going to look at what was found in your office and what was not found after you left. Eric, we're going to Exhibit 36 within that exhibit.
She keeps throwing the binky out and then like laying on it. I'm like, doesn't that hurt? It's like digging in your ribs. She don't care. Plugs up the drool. That's why I like them. Let's get in here closer. Gotta start fixing my posture. I ain't getting no younger. Ooh. I think I fucked up my leg.
We're almost there. Now go to the 4th page of that exhibit. We're looking at Exhibit 127, Exhibit 36 to that exhibit, page.
She's a baby,
3.
more pliable than we adults are. Dude, she's literally
see
just a ball of rubber bands.
That in your
eats.
office, there was an
It's-
inventory
It is
made, right?
incredible
Correct.
And we can see
how unbothered
that
she
you're a
is
guy that kept a
by
journal,
her hips
right?
being
I kept notes.
completely
yes, sir.
flat or
And we can see
inverse
that these
or
notes,
whatever.
if
You
you
know what I
flip
mean?
back
Like
the page prior, Eric,
nothing matters to her.
you can see
Nothing
they
bothers
go,
her. It's not. It doesn't
from
even slow down.
2018
There's no
January,
resistance.
and they go all
Just-
the way to June of 2020, right?
It's flip-flop ragdoll. I wish I could ragdoll.
June of 2020. And that's where they stop. Isn't that right?
That's what that reflects, yes.
Where are they?
Where are what, sir?
The notes that are missing.
Again, sir, I began using a program called OneNote. And OneNote, what it does, I know you don't understand, but OneNote, what it does is it's an electronic note-taking system.
I stopped taking notes on dead trees.
The way I had it
went
organized
to some
I had
liberal witch
civil
device
lit,
to take notes.
I had child support.
Yeah.
I had admin. I had criminal justice. I had law enforcement. And so that was a tab. And so it let me more effectively organize my notes by deputy. When I turned in my machines, OneNote was there. It may still be there. I don't know. When I turned in, I lost access.
Who is Jordan Berry?
Jordan Berry is a political
Boyfriend.
consultant who is a political consultant for Mr. Paxton, among others.
Among who others?
Good question. Probably some individuals in this room. I don't know all his clients.
Which individuals in this room?
So I'd be guessing.
You don't know who Jordan Berry represents?
I don't know all of his clients. I mean, if there's in this room, maybe Senator Middleton, I
don't want to talk about the senators. I'm talking about other entities that Jordan Berry may represent. Do you know of any?
Well, then fucking specify in your fucking question. Don't be mad at him.
I know he represents members of the House.
Entities.
I don't know, sir.
Don't know. Okay.
True Americans only take notes on dead trees to support the paper mills. This is true. This guy a plant for sure.
I guess we kind of all got to know.
It's probably one of those hemp
when you
hippies.
went to the FBI,
I'm sure they know.
what crime
One
did
note is
you
likely
have
tied
this
to the email
so-called
address.
good faith belief
Yeah.
occurred?
Because if it's going through like Teams or something like that, and
The
it's
good
all
faith
part of the
belief
same Microsoft
that
suite,
we believe
you can't get into that
occurred
shit anymore.
was
And that's why he don't know where it is,
believed
because he
that
turned over the
he
device.
potentially could have
He
been
doesn't have
subject
the
to
login for the
blackmail.
email anymore. He can't
And
get
as a
to
result, he was taking illegal actions on behalf of what we then knew was a campaign donor, but he was taking actions on behalf of Mr. Paul.
You believed he was being blackmailed?
At one point, I actually believed he was being blackmailed, sir.
So you didn't think he was committing a crime? You thought somebody was committing a crime against him?
At one point in time, I believed that, yes, sir.
If that's why you went to the FBI?
Well, eventually we went because I had tried on several occasions to have, as I think in one of my memos says, that you probably have on here, asked him, I really wanted him to come clean. I even said, are you under
Zero.
undue influence,
Come on.
sir?
And he said no.
He did say no, yes.
He never said, I'm being blackmailed. I'm under undue influence.
But his actions didn't reveal that. When we found out that this woman that he'd had the affair with from years ago, that
On a
had
side,
moved up to
bit my
Austin
tongue.
and
On a
was
side
now
note, this is a
employed
good
by
argument
Mr.
to keep
Paul,
a copy of all
and
of
that he was
your
taking these unusual
Gov
actions.
company
It
device
just didn't
data
make
so you can
sense to
have
me,
it in
Mr.
case of a
Busby. I
lawsuit
hear
since
you.
they control the flow of the device. Oh,
You
absolutely.
made some assumptions.
Even when they
not?
tell you don't make a copy, I
You
always
made some
make a copy.
assumptions.
I made some reasonable assumptions, yes, sir.
You made some assumptions,
I
right?
made some.
Three whole points of the
Yes.
devices.
Okay.
Yeah, you're supposed to
And
reduce
you
the
know that
clutter.
sometimes assumptions are wrong.
I have to keep a backup
right?
of it,
I
though,
remember
right?
that Odd Couple episode. We're probably similar age. Probably no one else gets that, Mr. Busby.
It's like, don't you throw me off.
You believed he may have a potential conflict of interest. That's what you said at some point, right?
You'd have to refresh my memory on that, sir.
I liked
said,
OneNote. I think I liked
I do not have
Evernote
any
a little bit
specific
better.
evidence, right?
But that was like before I had an iPhone.
You'd have to refresh my memory, sir.
Let me ask you something. When you,
Let me ask you something.
do you remember there was a hearing in Travis County District Court where you testified?
Yes.
That by Zoom, I believe, yes.
Yeah.
I was subpoenaed.
And you were asked point blank, let me make sure I get this exactly right, because this might be something that's important to our
Let's
jurors.
see if homeboy objects to anything. He's over there taking a nap. Hopefully he can wake up.
You were asked under oath whether you believe the AG was engaged in ongoing criminal activity in connection with Nate Paul. Do you remember being asked that question?
Objection
I don't think
relevance.
that's
It's a
the
different
question I was
case.
asked, sir.
You don't think that was what was asked?
I do not think that was the question was asked.
Okay. Do you remember, what question do you think was asked, just so maybe we can refresh your recollection?
I'd love to see the transcript. That would be the best evidence.
Were you ever asked whether you believe that Ken Paxton was engaged in criminal activity?
I don't believe I was ever asked that question during that hearing.
Okay. You believe you were asked about the AG's office itself?
Yeah, he's being squirrely. He
Best
won't let him
again,
see the
if I could look at the
transcript.
transcript, that would tell us
Yeah,
all
he
what
wants
was
to see
asked.
it.
Let's do that. We're going to look at the transcript from the Travis County District Court, the 250th Judicial District, a hearing that was held on the first day of March 2021. We're going to turn to page 189 of that transcript, Eric. You were asked point blank under oath 6 months after you had went to the FBI this question. Line 15, page 189, Eric.
If it was a lawyer, I'd have said he was using some kind of guilty notes. It's like
I'm going to read it.
I'm
make sure. Tell me if I read it right. And did you come to believe
I like
that
to
the Office
write,
of Attorney General was being
and I find
engaged
myself writing on
in
like little
ongoing
stuff
criminal
here and there.
activity in
I have
connection
paper
with Nate
around me
Paul?
everywhere.
That was the question, correct?
Which is different than the question you asked me.
That's why we're looking at it.
I know.
That was the question you were asked, true?
That is true. Yes, sir.
Let's
You
look
read it
at
correctly.
what your answer was. Page
He
190,
corrected
line
him.
15.
I love it.
You said,
I love it when the witness corrects on cross.
tell us what you said. If you don't want me to read it, you can read your testimony yourself.
Objection. I don't believe this is in evidence, Your Honor. I stand to be corrected, and if so, I'll withdraw the concern, but I don't believe it's in evidence.
This is House Board of Managers Exhibit 466 that was offered and received by this court. We're looking at page 190, line 15. You said, and I know it called for yes or no,
That makes you look
but
foolish.
it's a question that it's hard to give a yes
Big
or no.
whiff.
So that makes it difficult for me as the witness. But I would say it could have led to that. Certainly, did I have concerns? I had
Pardon me, I
potential
apologize
concerns.
again, Mr. Busby. Excuse me, please. I think this comes under the heading of, it is one, of course, our exhibits. I don't object to it being introduced, but I don't believe it has. It is not one of those that was agreed to by the parties, and if you recall, they wouldn't
That
originally
big-ass
agree to
list of
any
numbers.
our exhibits, and then we reached some agreements we read in this morning. I don't think it's one of them. So if he wants to offer it, I'm not going to object, but I don't believe this document is in evidence.
Would you like to offer it?
Well, first, it's in evidence, but just to satisfy my co-counsel,
No, it's not in
colleague
evidence.
over
She just
there,
went through that long
I'll
ass
offer it
list of what's
again.
in evidence.
He did not object.
Yeah.
It's submitted to evidence.
So now let's
Thank you.
focus on this document that's in evidence.
Oh, here we go. The snark.
You
the
were asked point
snark.
blank. And this is 6 months. I mean, come on. 6 months
Daniel.
after he left the office. 6 months after he went to
What's
the
up, dude?
FBI.
The
This is
Texas
after
Attorney General,
some
like
of
the Texas
some of your colleagues had filed
prosecutor,
a very
lawyer,
public lawsuit, right?
is being impeached.
And
They're
this is even
removing
after
him.
that you had been interviewed.
And he's
in
on
the
trial
press,
right now.
right?
So we're watching
I
it.
believe one time.
And I'm
yes.
making
Yeah, and
fun of
all
it.
kinds of things were going on in the press about these so-called whistleblowers and crimes and all kinds of things. And then here you are, placed under oath in March of 2021, and you were asked point blank whether you believed the Office of the AG had been engaged in ongoing
Them
criminal
southern
activity
beaches.
in relation to Nate Paul, and you couldn't even give an answer. Could you?
With regard to the Office of Attorney General, correct.
You're making some distinction between the office and the AG himself?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because you didn't want to say that you had been engaged in criminal activity, right?
I don't believe, no.
I mean, part of the so-called criminal activity is the MIDI intervention, isn't it? And you were dead in the middle of that, weren't you?
I approved the executive memorandum.
Isn't it ironic that the first
Don't you think?
witness called in this case for the House
A little too ironic.
on the first article of impeachment that was passed, that this witness, you, approved that intervention? Isn't that ironic?
I don't know, sir.
Don't you think that really reflects the whole House's case? That they put you up here as the witness to tell us how bad Ken Paxton was, and on the very first article, you approved it. Isn't that ironic?
The irony, I guess, is lost on me, sir.
Is it? Before I get to some of these other
You said
more
no,
difficult topics,
sleazeball.
would
I don't
you
want to play
help
with
us?
you.
And we have people watching, and of course, some of our jurors are not lawyers. I want to talk to you about the burden of proof. You know what the burden of proof is, right? You know what that concept means?
I do, yes.
Okay, there's one burden called more likely than not. You understand that concept?
Okay, yes.
What does that mean?
Whether a fact is more likely than not, like the preponderance of the evidence.
Yep, and that's the
By
easiest
a
standard of proof if you're somebody advocating for something, right?
That's the normal standard in a civil court.
Okay, let's focus.
With some
Ooh, we're almost
exceptions.
at 300 followers.
There are.
Let's go.
Turn
282.
your microphone on, please.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. I'm sorry. He's not being offered as an expert on the burden of proof, and that's something for the jury to decide in their own mind, his view of what it is or not. He didn't bring these charges. The House managers did. He's not here for that purpose. It's unfair to be trying to, and irrelevant, for him to be being asked what his definition of the burden of, in fact, I must say I've never heard that done before. And so I object to it as being totally irrelevant and improper for this witness to be even cross-examined about. What difference does it make what he thinks the burden of proof is? It's what they think the burden of proof is.
Wait a minute, Your Honor. With all due respect, this counsel asked this man many times about his opinion on whether law has been broken, many times. And so I'm entitled to ask him about the burden of proof, especially on illegality, which remember, he stood up there or sat up there and said that Ken Paxton signing a contract was illegal. So you can't open the door and then close it now.
He has not testified as to what this jury ought to do or how they ought to look at the burden of proof. He was asked whether or not he thought the conduct was unlawful. He said he did, but the burden of proof has nothing to do with it. Those are two different things. The burden of proof is decided by the jurors out there, not this man or any other witness.
I'm entitled to explore why he would say something like that. Like in his, what is the burden of proof? And I'm going to get to that.
This is normally
if I
said when
quit
they
being
approach.
interrupted.
I'm surprised that they're not doing it.
Overruled. You open that door.
Now, let's talk about the burden in this case for the senators, our jurors. Beyond a reasonable doubt. What does that mean?
Well, it means what it says. It means that you don't have any reasonable doubt.
In other words, any doubts I have are not reasonable.
You know, I'm not a criminal lawyer, but that's beyond a reasonable doubt.
When you went to the FBI
My spine.
and you offered up a good faith belief that Ken Paxton had been engaged in criminal activity, in your mind, was that beyond a reasonable doubt?
Proof hunting.
I didn't.
You got to get a burden of proof
You
blind.
just suspected. Isn't that true?
Got to get a truth
Didn't
blind.
think about the burden of proof at all in those conversations.
You know, I would think that if you portrayed yourself, and I'm not challenging that you were a good and trusted
Challenge
friend,
him.
a good and trusted advisor, a good and trusted confidant in some cases, right?
She's
To
wet.
Ken Paxton.
She can't sit
I
still.
don't know about confident.
Well, confidant.
Confidant, sorry about that. Sometimes my speech impediment comes through. I apologize.
No worries, I'm not picking on you. I just want to make sure you understand
He is
the concept.
picking on you,
I mean,
idiot.
You told us, the entire
right
public,
back.
that you
I
had
gotta
a
change the
meeting with
baby.
Ken Paxton. He talked about his marriage. Told us that, right?
Well, Mr. Paxton and Mrs. Paxton had a meeting with
We
senior
do not
staff
care.
and talked about their marriage, yes.
Okay, so I guess it brings me to the point. Wouldn't you want to make sure that you are absolutely sure that Ken Paxton was doing something untoward and illegal before you went to the FBI? Wouldn't that be what a trusted confidant would do? Somebody who's a trusted friend, somebody who's been trusted to run the office. At least you should make yourself sure. You know what? Before I do this, because when I pull that trigger, when I do that, all bets are off. I'm out. You even said, I knew when I did that, I wouldn't be the first deputy again, right?
First assistant, yes,
First
sir.
assistant. So shouldn't you be sure before you do that?
Or we were confident.
You were confident?
Yes,
You
sir.
thought that Nate Paul had made repairs on his home?
I've been told that, yes.
Who told you that?
I believe, again, it was either Mr. Wicker or Mr. Rylander.
You think that Mr. Wicker said that to somebody?
Yeah, again, it was either Mr. Wicker or Mr. Rylander.
It seems to me that would be so important you'd remember who told you that. I mean, you're telling me somebody told me my boss was having a campaign donor pay for renovations of his house, and you can't even tell us who told you that?
Well, I said I believe it's Mr. Wicker or Mr. Rylander, sir.
So if it's not Mr. Wicker, because it wasn't, you're saying it would be Mr. Rylander?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You ever played the telephone game with your kids?
I played the telephone game in youth group, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Not with my kids.
Okay, well, how many kids you got?
I've got 3.
I've got 4, so sometimes I play the telephone game, and you know what that is, right?
I do, yes, sir.
Okay, that's a game where somebody whispers something to somebody else, and then they turn around and whisper something to somebody else, and then they turn around and whisper something to somebody else, and so on, and then they let the last person repeat what they think they were told.
Yes, sir.
And sometimes it's comical how different the story is that's been passed from person to person to person and person, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's what happened here.
I don't know.
A stray comment from Drew Wicker claims he heard that he misunderstood you, a trusted advisor, a trusted friend. You believe that Nate Paul had paid for the renovations of Ken Paxton's home.
I believe that was possible, yes, sir.
Do you know that it's not true?
I do not know that it's not true.
Have you ever tried to find out?
No, that's why we went to law enforcement, for them to find out.
Why didn't you just ask Ken Paxton?
I had resigned.
You know, he could have shown you the invoices, the wires, the receipts, the samples. You didn't ask him.
I saw them because you had a press conference where you had them. That's when
I only shown a few. I'm going to show them all in this trial.
Okay. I haven't seen them.
How many times have you told people that Ken Paxton had somebody pay for the renovations of his home? How many times you said that to people?
I don't know if I've ever said that until you asked me the question.
You wouldn't say that to somebody, would you?
I don't have a recollection of saying it.
I mean, you shouldn't say it, should you?
Shouldn't say it.
In other words, you don't know it's true. You shouldn't be out there repeating it, should you?
I don't believe I've been repeating it.
Okay. I think you said, if I'm not mistaken, let me just ask you point blank. You remember you talked about your potential concerns about the office? Remember that question?
From the transcript?
Yeah. Remember that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You have said that in 2020, you became aware that Nate Paul had donated to Ken Paxton's campaign. Is that right?
That's when I became aware of that campaign contribution.
And when you became aware, you learned, I'm sure, that one campaign donation was actually made in October of 2018, right?
That's correct.
And you learned that October 2018 campaign donation was $25,000, right?
That is correct, sir.
And that Nate Paul was a campaign donor, played a part in your belief that Ken Paxton was engaged in unlawful conduct with regard to Nate Paul, right?
That was part, yes.
Okay, so let's make sure we ferret that out a little bit. You learned in 2020 of a campaign donation almost 2 years before, right?
That's correct, sir.
And the fact that a donation had been made 2 years prior played a part in your belief that Ken Paxton was doing something wrong with regard to Nate Paul. Is that right?
That was part, yes.
Okay. You know who else he gave money to?
Who else Nate Paul gave money to?
Did you check?
No, that wasn't my concern.
Do you know how much money Ken Paxton raised in 2018 for his campaign?
I did at the time. I know it was several $1 million.
What did you say?
I knew I would have known the number at the time. I know it was several $1 million.
Where is that? Where does that blow up? You have it blown up? You know what percentage what percentage of, in 2018, what percentage Nate Paul's campaign contribution was with regard to the total amount raised by Ken Paxton?
Well, if your math is correct on this demonstrative, it's there, but I wouldn't have known that then, no.
0.37%. Right?
That's what your demonstrative says.
2018, Ken Paxton raised $6.7 million. Did you know that?
I would have known that at the time, yes, sir.
You checked into that?
No, he would have told me.
And Nate Paul donated 25,000 of that, right?
I know Nate Paul donated 25,000, yes.
And the illegal activity that you complain about, or at least you claim you had a good faith belief had occurred, is 0.37% of that.
If that is the correct math, but I have no reason to dispute you on the math.
So let me just make sure I'm clear. When somebody feels aggrieved and they came to the AG's office to get help, that's the job of the AG's office, right? To help constituents?
That's part of our job, yes.
I mean, isn't that what we taxpayers are paying for?
That's part of our job, yes.
So when somebody feels aggrieved in some way and they don't know where to turn and they go to the AG's office, do you check to see if they're a donor of some sort?
Because of allegations made in the past against Attorney General Paxton, we were very sensitive when we were asked to do things on behalf of folks who
I'm just talking with my mic muted. My dumb ass.
So, yes, we were concerned about things like that.
You were. So you decide whether you're going to do your job.
No, sir.
Let me finish my question, please, if
Sorry,
you don't mind.
I apologize.
No worries. You decide whether you're going to do your job based on whether the person is donated to your boss? Is that what you're telling me?
I'm not telling you that, sir, no.
Okay. You look at someone with a jaundiced eye, if they're asking for assistance and they've also given money to the elected official that you're working for?
No, sir.
You're skeptical of somebody who's just asking for help, how to deal with a situation, and you're skeptical because they might also be a campaign donor?
No, not skeptical, no.
Okay.
No, sir.
But you already told us that Nate Paul was a campaign donor, played a part in your belief that Ken Paxton was engaged in unlawful conduct. That's what you said under oath, right?
That's correct, sir.
Is it possible, Mr. Mateer, that you jumped to a lot of conclusions really fast?
I don't believe so, sir.
And you could have put all this to bed if you'd just talked to your boss.
I attempted to talk to him starting probably in June, July, August, September.
No.
I did.
Take it easy.
I did talk to him, sir.
Take it easy.
No, he's not here.
You could have, once you met up with the rest of your colleagues on the 8th floor, you could have then, as the leader, you were the leader, right, of the group?
You're the leader.
The first assistant.
Yeah, you're the leader.
First among equals. Yes.
You even said in your testimony, you said, look, I manage the day-to-day business of that office. Remember saying that?
I did manage the day-to-day office.
And I control the office. Remember saying that?
Control the office. I don't know if I said it in that way, sir.
We'll get to it.
Okay.
But you as the leader, once you heard all these foolishness concerns, some of which you might have believed, some of which you didn't, your job at that point in time was to go to the boss. Isn't that right?
I had tried to go to the boss.
Is it because you wanted to be the Attorney General? Is that what was going on?
Anybody who knows me, Mr. Busby, knows that that is not one of my ambitions. I had my dream job. I came to help Ken Paxton, came down here, a city I didn't want to move to.
Wait, your dream job was to be a federal judge, and that got squelched. Isn't that right?
No, actually, my dream job has always been to be at First Liberty.
Weren't you supposed to be a federal judge, and then the 2 senators objected to you?
What 2 senators, sir?
The 2 that would have the ability to object to you. You know who I'm talking about.
You're talking about our senators?
Yes.
They didn't object to me.
They didn't?
No, Senator Cruz certainly didn't.
Well, somehow something went awry, and you're not a federal judge, are you?
That's absolutely true. My nomination was withdrawn by President Trump.
Yeah. And that's the job you really wanted, right?
I did want to be a federal judge.
Sure.
But my dream job was First Liberty.
Okay.
Which is a horrible fucking organization, by the way. Fuck them.
Now,
Protecting
I
religious freedom
understand that
because they're so
you
fucking oppressed. They want to
took the
shove prayer
place
down everybody's
of
fucking
Chip
throat.
Roy. Is that right?
That's correct.
Chip Roy was the first assistant.
But
before
even
you.
Bible thumper
That's
kids
correct,
like, yo, this guy's
You
fucking
mentioned
crooked.
kind of in passing that Ken Paxton at some point became unhappy with Chip Roy.
We do not care.
Chip Roy was not doing what he wanted him to do.
That's correct.
And he felt the same way about you during the conversation about Kamek, right?
The Attorney General never expressed that to me.
Well, you
has
told-
never expressed that to me.
I'm sorry. You told us all that he compared you to Chip Roy, remember?
What I said was Mr. Penley said that.
Penley said that
keep it
Paxton
straight.
had said that.
And I asked the Attorney General whether he was
Objection,
frustrated
hearsay.
with me, and he
Come
didn't
on,
respond
dude.
about being frustrated with me.
Is his mic off? Like, he doesn't know how to object at all.
Have you seen the second referral from the DA's office to the AG's office?
I may have.
Why would you have seen it at this point?
I had a conversation with Margaret Moore after I resigned and may have seen it during that conversation. Who was the Travis County District Attorney at the time?
Yeah, I know who she was. Listen, because we're running up against the lunch hour, I want to focus on MIDI real quick so we can just put this MIDI thing to bed, okay? You going to help me here?
You're asking the questions.
Okay,
I'll
thank you.
answer them.
Let's look at AG Exhibit 151. It's in evidence. And just so the members of the jury understand how the office worked, there's some policy or procedure there that you described as what you call executive action.
It's approval. It's the title's there, Mr. Busby. See,
Yeah, read
executive
it,
approval,
bitch.
civil litigation membership. He just
Executive
highlighted it
approval.
for us.
Sorry. Executive approval civil litigation memorandum.
Yeah.
Okay. We see here the letterhead. Letterhead is Ken Paxton.
I see that.
Okay. And basically it takes us through various people within the bowels of the AG's office who would approve something like this, right?
It starts with someone in the division and goes its way up. Yes, sir.
And this is just found in some policy manual somewhere, right?
Now, it was a policy of the office.
Is
Yes.
it written down?
It is written down, sir.
Okay. Now, so let's just look. With regard to intervention on behalf of the public interest in charity, we have a sign-off of Mary Henderson, who's a senior attorney, right?
Correct.
We have, looks like Josh Godby, who is the chief of the Financial Litigation and Charitable Trust Division, right?
That's correct, sir.
We have also signed off here Darren McCarty, who is, what is he, for civil litigation, head of civil litigation?
He's the Deputy Attorney General for Civil Litigation.
And then at the top of the chain is your name, where you signed off on June 8th of 2020, correct?
That is correct, sir.
And of course, all of these people here that we see on Exhibit 151 derive their authority from the Attorney General. Isn't that right?
From the Attorney General and the statutes and the Constitution, yes.
I mean, it doesn't matter whether you think it's a good idea or not. He, the Attorney General, is a decision maker ultimately. Isn't that true?
I mean, that authority is delegated down through.
I understand. You can delegate authority, but you can also take it back, can't you?
I think that's correct, sir.
Right. So let's make sure we're clear. Any authority you had only existed as long as you served the Attorney General. Isn't that right?
I think the government code gives the first assistant authority when the Attorney General is absent.
When he's absent.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right. Not when he's on a business trip doing work on a case for Google. You don't get to just say, oh, he's out of town, now I'm in charge. That ain't how it works, is it?
I certainly never did that, sir.
Yeah. And you better not do that, because that'll get you fired, right?
You
I mean,
better
if you were
not.
to do that, that should be
Get
a
the fuck
fireable
outta here.
offense, right?
Objection.
Again, as long as the Attorney
Protect your
General were
witness.
exercising his
He's
proper authority
counting
as
on you to
well pursuant
defend
to the
him.
Constitution and the laws.
Let's look at
Let him get beat
why
up.
the person that generated this executive approval civil litigation memorandum, let's look at why they thought it was the right thing to do to intervene into this MIDI litigation. Turn over, if you would, to page 2 of this document, Eric. I mean, it goes on for several pages with the justification as to why it's a good idea for the AG's office to intervene. Is that true?
That's the purpose of the memo, to set forth the reasons why to take an action.
Did you review it before you signed it?
I did.
Did you have the opportunity to say, you know, I don't think that's sufficient justification?
I would have had that, yes.
And can we agree that even if you thought it wasn't a good idea, that you could be overruled by your boss?
Yes.
Okay, just so we're clear on that, I want to make sure everybody hears that even if, let's say just as an example, using the MIDI intervention as an example, if you'd have looked at this and said, you know what, I don't think this detailed memo that goes into line by line of all the problems that the MIDI Foundation has had, I don't think that's sufficient justification to intervene, and you said, you know what, I'm not going to sign that, the Attorney General could overrule that however he chose. Isn't that right?
I believe that's correct.
Because you're not in charge, are you?
Ultimately, the elected official is the Attorney General.
Because you've never gotten any votes, have you?
No.
You didn't get 4.2 million votes, did you?
I've never run for any office.
4.2 million out of 30
He
or
did,
40.
right?
He did.
Yeah. He's the one that's elected, right?
He is elected.
He's the boss, true?
He is ultimately, yes.
And you serve at his pleasure, isn't that right?
The first assistant serves at the Attorney General's
You're a
pleasure.
political appointee, isn't that right?
That's correct.
And if he doesn't trust you anymore, then you're out the door, isn't that right?
That's correct.
And that's how it works with political appointees, isn't it?
That's correct.
It's at will. When he doesn't trust you anymore, you leave, right?
Or vice versa, yes.
Sure. Let's look at all the problems with the MIDI Foundation. Go, Eric, if you would, to page 4, where they're laid out, the bullet points are laid out, the justification of the intervention by the AG's office. Do you see them there?
I see the allegations, yes, sir.
And are those sufficient still in your mind for the intervention?
Again, I approved that memo at the time, yes, sir.
You stand by it today, don't you?
That I approved the memo on that day, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Nobody tricked you to get your signature, did they?
No one on that date tricked me,
Okay.
yes, sir.
And we can see all the problems. Apparently, or allegedly, the former chairman attempted to conjure a sale of the investment properties in a self-dealing transaction. See that bullet point?
I see it there, sir.
It says that they hadn't filed the proper IRS forms. See that?
Is that the fourth bullet point,
Yes, sir.
You got
I
hiccups,
see
little
what
girl?
it says.
They refused to disclose
hiccups
certain
every
fee
day.
agreements, right?
In utero.
I see that bullet point, sir.
You knew, of course, that one of the individuals who had been involved had gotten in trouble criminally. You knew that, didn't you?
I don't know if I knew that, sir.
Don't remember that?
I do not remember that.
Okay. You know, there's been some saying here. I want to make sure because we're putting Article 1 to bed, which I think puts the whole case to bed. But look at Article 1. Impeachment Article 1, please. It starts off, it says, protection of charitable organization. Do you see that there?
At the top, yes, I see.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
I'm kind of doing you like
I
you
was
did me.
reading the paragraph, not the title.
That's false in itself, isn't it?
What do you mean?
AG's office is not there to protect charitable organizations, is it?
What are you yelling at?
That is part of our role.
It's there by statute. It says by statute, the authority to intervene is to protect the public interest in charity. Isn't that true?
And I think that's what that means.
It's a whole different thing than protecting charities, isn't it?
No, I don't think so, sir.
I mean, the reason for the intervention is because they thought the people within the charity were doing things that were wrong. And so we're protecting the public's interest in the charity, correct?
I don't think they're necessarily exclusive, sir.
You also authorized an investigation of the MIDI Foundation.
She's learning how to make
I remember
words.
seeing those documents, yes, sir.
Sorry, not sorry. It's cute.
Let's see. Keep it on. I didn't know what time you wanted to do lunch. Is it now? It's a good time to break for me if you want.
Good time for you?
Yes, sir.
All right, we will break until 1:30, 45 minutes.
All right. Well, I'm going to take a break as well. Thanks for hanging out with me, everybody who's here. I don't know if I'll get back to this next part because I need to eat and do stuff around the house. So I'll see y'all around. Thanks for hanging out.